Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to our online discussion of November the 13th, 2015. This is Amy Albert, the
Hello.
director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet, and I'm Christian Debré. Sorry, the camera is not adjusted properly. And I'm a member of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet too. So, TVNDY, which is Toujours Vivant Not Dead Yet, is a project of the Council of Canadians with Disability. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability right opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminate against people with disability. Today's topic: safeguard, too little, too late. Physician Guide to Medical Aid in Dying. So Amy will
Thanks.
comment on it.
Yep, thanks. So, too little, too late. Physician's Guide to MAD, Medical Aid in Dying, or MAD. A few weeks ago, we talked about the Quebec Physician's Guide to Medical Aid in Dying, and we promised that we would get back to some more details. So today we'll return to the guide. And this is actually going to be a little longer session because there's an awful lot of material in there. So it can be hard to talk about safeguards in the guide because it's hard to describe something that isn't there. And also because the authors assume that safeguards are not necessary. In other words, they assume everything is fine, everybody's going to be good, and there will never be any problems. Yeah, basically.
There is a song in French. It's a what is the again?
Everything's fine, Madame.
No, but
Tout le monde va bien. Tout le monde va bien.
Everything's good. Nothing happened except that.
Except this one little thing.
Comment on appelle ça, une jument? C'est
Mare.
Une jument.
A horse.
Oui, the horse, but the female horse.
Mare.
Mare, okay. The mare is, your mare, gray mare is dead.
Right, right.
But it was dead because it died in a fire, and the fire was set up back up because the Duchess, and at the end, they lose everything.
Right, right. But there's no real problem. Also, though all the decisions are left up to one doctor, the responsibility for protecting people in vulnerable positions really rests with society as a whole. So by looking at this as a medical issue, it's all left in the hands of one doctor, even though it really, the problems that are presented are problems that society as a whole should deal with.
Yeah, and 100% of doctors are very, very good people. They are saints. Everybody of them.
Right, right. There's never any problems. And in fact, most of the doctors really do want to do well, except for they have this idea that killing equals easing pain. And that's not true. Easing pain is easing pain, and killing is killing, and they're not the same thing. So some of the typical problems that we found in Quebec, in the Quebec plan, include, first of all, the safeguards are seen as working against the person's interest, and that's mentioned on pages 21 and 31 of the guide. And the reason, of course, that the safeguards are seen as working against the person because they don't think that there are any problems in the process.
Yeah. And so if they don't kill one people because he asked, it's his view like it's something wrong in the process. No, right. If somebody is still living and living good, is the target, not to kill people.
Right, exactly. So they think that if somebody asks, automatically they should be killed, and there's no thought that there might even be a problem with the person asking. So the other, another problem in the Quebec program is that dying is portrayed as relief from suffering. And that you can see in several sections, pages 17, 30, and 31 in the report. But in fact, like I said before, dying is not it's not the end of suffering, it's the end of life. It's not the same thing.
Not exactly the same.
Pain relief
It doesn't
is the
so
end of
far
suffering.
anymore, but you are dead.
Right. Pain relief is the end of suffering. Emotional relief is the end of suffering. Relief of depression is the end of suffering. Dealing with unresolved family problems is the end of suffering, but dying is not the end of suffering. So they're a little confused on that. Also, you'll see in the program that standards are relaxed over time. You want to go see what that is?
Yes.
Stan's going to go see what the dog's up to. You'll see in the guide that they're already anticipating that the standards will be relaxed over time. They're planning for it already. The program hasn't even started yet, and but you can see in a couple of places they're already planning for the standards to be relaxed. Also, as I said before, all decisions are concentrated in the hands of one doctor, and we'll talk a little more about that later. By taking a strictly medical approach, this program does not address the primary reasons that people ask for assisted suicide. And those are, of course, loss of autonomy, loss of ability to do things the person enjoyed, believed loss of dignity, loss of control of bodily functions, feeling like a burden. Those are all things that are social problems that relate to how the person believes that they are as a person with a disability and what services and supports they have to continue living the life that they had before they became disabled. The only thing, in fact, that is medical is pain or concerns about pain, which is the least often cited reason that people have for asking for assisted suicide.
Yeah. Pain itself, it's plus or minus around 2% of the death of people.
Right. People who are actually in pain, it's a very, very small number. So a lot of people are worried about being in pain, but in fact, effective palliative care can prevent pretty much all pains.
Oh, not pretty much all pain. There is a very tragic or method at the end for a very, very few people, which is the sedation.
Yeah.
Sedation is put somebody in coma, and it kills pain, but not the person. And it could be, the people could be awakened.
Right.
So you could say, okay, I'm suffered too much, please put me in coma, and wake up me in 3 days because I want to talk to my daughter or something like that.
Who's coming in?
It could be interrupted. But in the Québec law, if you ask for the terminal sedation, you're dead. They will never wake up you. You will die without seeing your daughter.
Right, exactly. So another problem with the safeguards is that they reflect prejudice and discrimination about disability. For example, in the psychological suffering that merits euthanasia, some of those things include total dependence, what they call total dependence, which means somebody who has a disability who needs help from others to do activities of daily living. And also desperation when faced with what somebody sees as a no-win situation. And it's important to remember that these things can be caused by badly managed services or no services at all, and also these things could apply to a survivor of domestic violence who is rendered dependent by her abuser, and also generally will feel that she's in a no way out situation. So,
but it's only a feeling.
Right.
That's not true. There is always solution.
That's why supports exist for people in domestic violence situations.
But if it is not offered to you,
right, you're not going to know about it, and you're not going to have those options available to you.
Yeah.
And it's
and
the same.
Is the doctor is obligated to tell you that there is other option existing?
No.
What trouble?
The doctor is supposed to tell you about medical treatments that are available, but the doctor doesn't know about and doesn't have any obligation to either tell you about or help you find services that you need to continue to live and have a good quality of life. And another thing that you can see in this guide is the assumption that living while dying is intolerable. So during the dying process, the idea is that, going through that process is intolerable, whereas a lot of people find it very rewarding to deal with.
It's not fun,
right?
But it's not a part of life that you should or you must get rid of it.
Right.
It could be very.
It can be rewarding in certain ways. So, for example, when my mom was dying of cancer, I had to take the bar exam, and she came and stayed with me while I did that. And she couldn't do an awful lot, but she did drive me to the exam place, and she stayed with me during the evenings. And I actually read to her during the evenings, and that was a really nice time we spent together. And that was while she was dying of cancer. So, people can have a rewarding end of life.
This is a part of palliative care.
Right, exactly.
Not medical aid of dying.
Right, exactly. The palliative care is when the pain is relieved, when the physical pain is relieved and you're no longer distracted, then you can work up the family problems and you can say the things that you need to your members of your family, and you can resolve the problems. And you can make your peace with, whatever spiritual path you've taken. And that's what palliative care is to help out with.
Yeah.
In the application process, there are very limited safeguards. For example, it lacks provisions for accessibility, such as sign language interpreters and scribes for people who have problems communicating. And there's no provision for print materials to be made available in alternate formats.
It could be helpful for people who want medical aid of dying or somebody to prevent it.
Right.
But in both cases, it's not good. They are not. They doesn't have take any
recognition
of that
disabled people. Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because people with disabilities represent basically everybody who gets assisted suicide has some kind of disability or other, but they're not accommodating the needs of disabled people, which is a really strange thing. And all the disability groups, whether or not they support assisted suicide, they said that we need the process to be accessible to disabled people. And neither on the federal level or in the Quebec regulations or in this guide, nowhere are there provisions for accessibility because people just don't think about it. There's also no protection against family members who have financial interests who might witness or the signing of forms or write out the forms for people. So the guide does say that people who work in long-term care facilities or who are service providers can't be witnesses, but it doesn't say that family members who have a financial interest can't sign.
Oh, you may wish that an old aunt or uncle have to die a little bit earlier because you want the money.
Your hands on that inheritance.
You're a little bit greedy, and the uncle is old and suffering, and the suffering.
Right, exactly.
And the uncle.
Right, so, maybe your uncle had a stroke and he can't write anymore, so somebody's got to fill out the form, and so maybe you'll write out the form for him, and when he talks, well, it's kind of hard to understand him, but
doesn't want to suffer anymore.
Right, or he says something and you interpret that to mean that he wants to die, and so you fill out the form for him. There's nothing to prevent you from doing that, even if you have a financial interest in his affairs. And you know, people say they
But
have this
you
belief.
don't have it.
Yeah.
Quebecers are saints.
Right, right.
No one will
nobody
try to
ever
do
do
that.
that.
No, 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 no. We're better than anybody else in the world. Better
Right.
than Belgium, better than American. We're better than everybody.
Yeah, right. Also, nothing in the regulations prevents a doctor from falsifying documents. And since the doctor is the only one who writes out the report,
Doctor are saint too.
Right,
But
right.
I don't know, something happened. There is a guy who killed his wife and 2 kids in the court right now, and they are all saints. He
Right.
must have something
Right.
bad with him.
He's the exception that proves
Yeah,
the rule.
maybe.
They're all saints, except for the ones that aren't. But yeah, doctors, there's nothing to prevent them from falsifying records. There's no checks and balances to make sure that these kind of things don't happen. And there don't appear to be any barriers to applying multiple times. So if some person applies and gets rejected because they're not eligible, there's nothing to prevent them from going back and applying to a different doctor who could say,
Yeah,
oh, sure, you're eligible.
You miss it because this thing was not right for it. You just change this a little bit and apply to another doctor. Yeah, I could kill myself with help.
Right, exactly. So also, there's nothing to prevent abuse. There's nothing, the doctors don't have training to detect signs of abuse, nor is a psychosocial evaluation or a home visit required. So there's no requirement that if somebody is applying for assisted suicide, that somebody go to their home and make sure that there's no abuse happening. So again, with that person whose uncle, you know, is sick, they could dress him up and make him look really good, and he's really put together, and they bring him to the doctor's office, and everybody's acting real nice, and the doctor does an examination. He doesn't see any marks on the guy, but, you know, and he looks okay, but then if they went to the home, they would find all kinds of problems. But since there's no requirement of a home visit, well, you know, they might miss signs of abuse.
You think?
Right. Also, there is no requirement that the doctor talk to the person's family. So if the person comes in and makes a demand, I want assisted suicide, and if the doctor had to talk to the person's family, like the case of Dr. Mortier in Belgium, it turned out that his mother had depression all her life. And if anybody had talked to him, he could have told them that, and that they probably wouldn't have let her have assisted suicide. But she said, well, you know, I'm just really depressed because I'm at the end of life and blah, blah, blah. So, you know, talking to the family could bring out inconsistencies and could show problems that might not otherwise show up, but there's no requirement to do that. So, you know, there's another safeguard going down the drain. Also, finally, there's no provision for intervention if abuse is detected. There's no requirement. Obviously, it would be a good idea, but there's no requirement that that happen. So again, another safeguard that isn't there.
You know, with a law like that, if somebody wants to jump from a bridge and they stop all the traffic down, firefighter should climb and push the guy.
Right, exactly.
It's easier.
Yeah, exactly.
The traffic will get back on the road
A lot
faster. Yeah.
Just as long as they scrape the guy off the road. Okay, in the law, there aren't many safeguards around the determination as to whether the person is competent to make the choice. It appears that only the medical judgment of the doctor, rather than a legal process as provided in the Civil Code of Quebec, is going to be used.
As provided. This mechanism exists
already.
Why they don't use it?
Right. It isn't written in the guide whether that process that already exists, that brings in a judge to that first of all has doctor plus a psychosocial evaluation by a social worker, and then a judge looks at the form. That really should be the process that's done, at least to determine whether the person is competent to make the decision. But even so, choosing to, the standard for competency on making medical decisions is to choose to undergo a medical procedure. But that's not the same as choosing to end one's life. If you're deciding between a medical procedure and not having it, that's usually a question of risk to yourself of not having the medical procedure. And if you elect not to do a medical procedure that could save your life, a lot of people are going to question your competency. But apparently, if you elect to do this, have euthanasia, which is automatically going to kill you, nobody seems to want to question your competency, and that's kind of strange. Also, nowhere in the guide is the word depression mentioned as it applies to people's mental health. And that seems kind of weird, since depression is a major motivator for people to want to kill themselves. So that's just another thing that's a little weird that we thought should be a safeguard, but it wasn't there. Another supposed safeguard is that the person should be making a free and informed choice. But the only problem is that the person is getting information from the doctor, but that's not the same as getting options to improve your quality of life.
And the doctor is not obligated to give any answer to the other side than medical aid of diet. He will inform how it happened, when it happened, and all the things around, but he is not obligated to inform that solution exists.
Right.
This is not an obligation.
Right. He's going to get some training on how to do medical aid in dying, but he doesn't have much training in palliative care. So he could maybe refer you to a palliative care person.
Or even to fight the pain.
Right.
He doesn't have training.
They don't have enough training to do that. So how do you know you're going to be getting good and balanced information and the full range of information? And also, what if you need other services to improve your quality of life, like home care? Doctors don't know about that stuff because that's not what they think about. They think about medical things. So, is this really going to be, or can you really make a free and informed choice if you're not getting the information? Also, the options that are offered are exclusively medical and don't address social and discrimination issues like home care. And finally, as we often say, the choice to die is an illusion where a person doesn't have a choice in where and how to live. Okay, the definition of end of life. It's supposed to be a safeguard, but it's not. The criteria are very, very broad, and they're entirely subjective. There's no objective part of the criteria there. The range is from 2 months to 8 years.
2 months to 8 years.
That could be considered end of life.
It's very, very wide.
Right.
And the doctor could decide to let you go in a reasonable way inside those boundaries. So from 2 months to 8 years.
Right.
You could start to ask for aid of dying 8 years because before you should die. You are at the end of life. Okay, probably it will not happen at 8 years, but be sure that it will happen to 1 or 2 years.
Right. Well, also they talk about various degenerative diseases that could take up to 8 years for somebody to die, and they're talking about people who are at the end of life who would have those degenerative diseases. I know somebody who's had multiple sclerosis for 33 years.
Yeah.
So, they can't always predict that. So the College of Medicine's the College of Physicians didn't focus on the stage that occurs only a few days before natural death. And when my mother was dying of cancer, the hospice people called us about 36 hours before she died and said, your mom's going to die in 36 hours, so you should all come to be with her. And that was exactly what happened. She died just about 36 hours after that, or maybe a little more, but they were very, very close because they saw that she had stopped eating and she was ready to go.
Yeah, it happened quite a lot of time that their prediction was good. But it happened quite a lot of time that their prediction are not good at all.
Right.
We know many, many people who have received 1, 2, or 3 death
terminal
diagnosis. You will die in 2 weeks or a month, and they are still living, sometimes many years after.
Right, exactly. So, in terms of the treating physician, as we said before, the decision is made and the procedure done by the treating physician. But the question is, what happens to the Québécois who do not have a primary care doctor? Do they just get seen by somebody and that person makes the decision based on one visit? They don't say so in the guide.
Nobody answers it.
Right, it's not a question that's answered because that's not how things work in the perfect world, and they're only talking about the perfect world. They're not talking about the real world. Also, does it include, it includes specialists as well as generalists, so that could mean that your podiatrist or your dermatologist or any one of those doctors who doesn't have a lot of experience in ending a life.
But they have the right to do it.
Right. They have the right to decide that you are eligible and to go ahead and give you euthanasia, regardless of their lack of experience. The guide puts a lot of pressure on treating physicians not to refuse to provide euthanasia, and that pressure is very intense. They invoke guilt, professionalism, and responsibility as part of putting that pressure on, saying, yes, you have the right not to do this, but you wouldn't be professional and you would be a really bad person if you didn't do that, if you didn't kill the person who has to be killed. Also, all decisions and power are in the hands of the treating physician, and the other doctors who participate are only there on an advisory basis, and the treating physician has veto power. So even if all the other doctors say, no, we don't think this person is eligible, the doctor can say, so, well, I think he is, so
that's bang. It, he is. Bang.
He's eligible. So, let's see. The guide calls for interdisciplinary teams, but those interdisciplinary teams aren't for working with the patient, they're for coaching the doctor.
And maybe they will never even see the patient.
They're suggested, but not required for working with the patient. Teams are required for coaching the doctor, but the multidisciplinary approach recommended is not guaranteed where resources are not available. And that's from a speech by the idea that only services that can be paid for will be available is from a speech by Philippe Couillard on the day that the law was approved on June 4th of 2014.
So even if you do a good law and everything over it, it's for only 75% of the population. The other 25 get lost.
Right, exactly. Okay, so this is referred to as a medical judgment. Euthanasia, but in fact, we know euthanasia is more than just a medical issue. It's the question of whether the person has capacity is a legal matter, whether the person is competent. And also the mental health and family supports are social issues, not just medical issues. Also, describing in the guide, they describe pain as impossible to relieve, but that shows ignorance of how palliative techniques work. And it's a little...
All pain could be really.
Right. It's a little distressing that these people who are supposed to be an authority are making these kind of mistakes in this guide. And also the requirement that the doctor assure himself that the person is eligible creates a very low standard of objectivity. So it's just the doctor's opinion, but the doctor's opinion is all that matters. And there's not a lot of objective evidence that has to be shown. Doctors have to develop expertise and proficiency in the techniques of euthanasia. But there's no indication of how the doctors are going to be trained also. So it doesn't say who's going to do the training. It doesn't say how much training they're going to get. It doesn't say anything like that.
All doctors will receive it.
Right.
And the level of each specialty who will receive the training.
Right.
Because if it's a palliative care doctor, he's already mainly trained. But if he's a skin doctor, he need a lot more training.
Right.
And at the end, even if he's good trained, and if he doesn't practice it, and 3 years after somebody asks him, something goes wrong.
Right. Exactly. Also, the guide estimates that each doctor will perform euthanasia less than once per year.
That's what I tell.
But is that going to give sufficient opportunity for people to practice it?
Probably not.
Probably not. But the other question that raises is, if there are 22,000 doctors in Quebec, does that mean there are going to be 22,000 people?
Oh, the population of Quebec will go down very fast.
Right. Exactly. Things don't always go as planned when performing euthanasia, and we know this from the United States, where performing lethal injections on prisoners often goes awry.
But it will not happen here. We are better than Americans.
Yeah.
We don't do that again.
Yeah. And it's gone awry so badly that some states have actually stopped doing executions because of that.
A lot of time it doesn't work properly.
Right, exactly.
For a different reason, but it was looking nice because more human and things like that. But we know one case of the dying of the people take 2 hours with the torture for many minutes, let's say 1.5 hours, something like that.
Right.
Torture.
That was a case that was reported out of the United States.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of states are stopping the executions, because there are a lot of problems with this procedure. And it's essentially the same procedure that's going to be used here.
But it's human.
But it's humane, yeah.
Humane, sorry.
So we know that things don't always go as planned, and we also know that there's not enough research to reliably predict what will happen in all cases. There's actually very little research because obviously it's not something you can do experiments on. You can only see what's happened in actual cases and do retrospective research on it. So,
well, a long time ago in the Second World War, there was research happening.
Yeah, there was actually. But that's not the kind of research we want to be doing. Doctors have some rights to express their conscience and not kill people. However, those rights are not very strong. In fact, they have to, even if they refuse to perform euthanasia, they still have to determine eligibility of somebody who asks for it. And they're not allowed to express their personal opinion about euthanasia in the way they determine a person's eligibility. So even if the doctor doesn't want to participate, he still has to participate. And then he also has to make a referral to another person for the actual euthanasia. And as I said before, there are several passages that discourage doctors from following their conscience and refusing to kill people. A couple of examples are on page 24 and 25. And finally, doctors who don't want to kill cannot act as provide a second opinion on other cases.
So it's sad because somebody who opposed this procedure is probably the most efficient people to to find some mistake in the procedure from the another doctor. But you say he could find something, so get rid of him. Get somebody who will not find anything.
Right, exactly. They want to rush this through. They don't want any delays or obstacles because they don't feel that there's a problem. They want the path to be as short as possible between when the person makes the request and when the person is killed. Some other issues: the length. What is the reasonable delay or the waiting period between when the person makes the request and when the person is killed?
Be reasonable. What they tell.
Right. Obviously, the waiting period is to ensure that the person really is serious about what they want to do, but it has to be long enough to allow for any treatments the person receives that might change their mind to be effective. So, for example, if the person decides to take antidepressants, you have to give it a couple of weeks for the antidepressants to take effect. Also, if the person tries a new pain medication, you have to give it time to adjust the pain medication so that it's a good balance between making the person sleepy and giving good pain relief. So, but, you know, when they say a reasonable delay, that is a completely subjective idea. And while it's nice to be flexible, it's also important to be objective at times. As we mentioned last summer regarding the regulations for forms doctors have to turn in to the commission, it appears that actual medical record will not be sent to the commission on end-of-life care. Instead, the forms and reports filled out by the treating physician can only be compared against the report of the second physician for accuracy. So you don't get the whole view of the person's medical history. You don't see the whole length of the person's life. So if the person has chronic depression, you're not going to see it. So there are a lot of problems with only looking at a report that the doctor fills out at the end.
Hide everything. Right. No trouble. Nobody should have trouble to kill people.
Right. Let's make everything look good. Everything look nice. Just, you know, don't make waves. Just make everything look smooth.
But still kill people.
There are also some problems that are unique to Quebec. First of all, Quebec continues to perpetuate the big lie that everyone supports euthanasia.
And it's really a lie.
Right. A report by Living with Dignity in 2012 showed that the majority of people who testified before the Commission on the question of dying with dignity opposed assisted suicide and euthanasia.
We was there.
Yep. Also, an Ipsos poll sponsored by Living with Dignity in 2013 showed that many people are confused about the term medical aid in dying and confuse it with palliative care.
Yeah. I want not suffering anymore.
Right. So you want palliative care,
yes,
not medical aid in dying. Palliative care prevents people from suffering. Medical aid in dying kills them. But many people think that medical aid in dying is the same as palliative care.
Terms are really mistaken. If you talk about euthanasia or assisted suicide, more people are against than if you ask, are you in favor of aid in dying?
Right. Because everybody wants to feel comforted and helped and
to have their family all around and so on and so on. That's what people want mostly for their death.
Right. Despite freedom of conscience provisions in the law, which is Section 72 for hospices, Quebec government is threatening to withhold funding from hospices that refuse to euthanize people. One hospice has already given in to the threat, but there are still 28 other hospices that are saying that they they do not want to kill people.
And in the law, they have the right to do that.
Right.
But if you do that, you will lose your
Funding.
Your funding. Yeah, that's what this the
Minister
the
Gaten
minister
Barrett, the
said
Minister of
to
Health.
them.
Yep.
Okay, you have the right, but don't do that.
You have the right, but you better not do it.
Yeah.
Which is, this is a very anti-democratic way of operating. So how is this going to be, how is euthanasia going to be done in Quebec? First of all, a nurse is going to prepare the intravenous site because everybody knows doctors can't find a vein.
A catheter.
Yep.
We install the catheter.
Yep, install the intravenous catheter. First of all, they will inject a tranquilizer so that the person will relax and fall asleep. Then they will put the person into an artificial coma using a barbiturate medication. And finally, they will inject a neuromuscular blocker to stop the heart and respiration. And that's, like I said, essentially the same thing that they do in other places.
Yeah, it is the standard procedure described in this document. But there is different products that could be used to do that.
Right. Right. So nurses, just a note on nurses, they have to help the doctors to at several stages in the process, including setting up the actual IV where the injection is going to be made. But the guide doesn't assure that nurses will have the same conscience rights to refuse to participate, especially in that last step is, right up to the end.
And if something goes wrong, what the doctor will say, nurse, please, nurse.
Come over here, help me.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that is the end of our look at the practice guide for the Quebec physicians on medical aid in dying. Let's see. To view our videos, we now have more than 60 webcasts available for viewing. To find them, go to YouTube or use the search engine of your choice to search for euthanasia and disability. To participate live, send me your email address and I'll send you a link to join us live. For more information on the subjects we discuss here, visit us at our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujourvivant, not dead yet, all one word. Visit our website at tvndy.ca. Email me at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow me on Twitter at TVNDY. Thanks so much for being with us. Thank you to Christian for helping to animate. Thanks. Have a good week.
Take care.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.